Look, okay. I know you've seen the title and the description and the thumbnail. In no way, shape, or form am I saying that Ultimate Spider-Man is better than a Spectacular Spider-Man or the Amazing Spider-Man from like the 80s or the 90s or whatever, or even Unlimited Spider-Man from the late 90s and early 2000s. I am just saying that I love Ultimate Spider-Man. And by making a video on this specific Spider-Man, Ultimate Spider-Man, instead of Spectacular, I'm not neglecting it. I'm just not paying proper attention to it. That's all. Because today, it's not about Spectacular Spider-Man. It is about finding out what makes Ultimate Spider-Man great to me. Ultimate Spider-Man came out in 2012. Do you know what happened in 2012? Neither do I. But as the turn of the decade was happening, there was a major shift in the way cartoons, especially action and superhero cartoons, were being televised. As early as 2006's cancellation of Teen Titans, the OG series, we can see a major shift in the way that television networks approach TV. In the early to mid 2000s, the top cartoon channels were doubling down on teen television and kid animation. Due to the success of a show like SpongeBob, Ed, Edd n Eddy, and others, networks began to realize that the easiest way to keep shows on air was to maximize toy and merchandise potential, as toys have always been the keys to success for cartoons and children's animated shows. But when you have shows that slightly drift away from their target audience by being, well, really fucking well written, like a Teen Titans or a Spectacular Spider-Man or even a Dandy Phantom, they tend to also decrease in toy sales subsequently. Being a kid growing up around this time, I remember the influx of shows like Teen Titans Go, Adventure Time, and well, today we're talking about Ultimate Spider-Man coming in to replace these shows. And to be quite honest, it was pretty refreshing growing up around this time. A lot of you guys watching this video know that when it comes to guys in our age range from like, I'll say 16 to 20, just a -2 and +2 to my age. One of the most common things that we have when it comes to growing up in our TV experiences is the collective frustration and just confusion that we had when we were watching some episodes of a Sonic X or a Dragon Ball Z Kai or a Samurai Jack, because, well, those shows came out weekly and you had to know what happened the last week in order to really understand what was happening this week. This is just how it is for serialized television, as opposed to the more episodic nature of some of the other shows I mentioned previously. If you didn't catch every episode, you didn't really know what was happening, and while watching the show as a child, sometimes you're just left sitting there saying,
wow, that was really cool,
but not really understanding what's going on. That's where shows like Ultimate Spider-Man and Teen Titans Go come in. Very episodic and over-explaining in nature to adjust to the new crop of kids to become more toy-friendly, kid-friendly, and in effect, also less mature. The reason why there's a correlation from these new types of shows to the new batch of kids is because also around this time, there were other distractions that were coming out that kids were starting to give their attention to. The video game boom was happening at the time, and shows had to still compete with that, even with a 24-hour TV schedule getting in the way of that. And because of that, a lot of shows had to make sure that, hey, kids aren't going to be turned off to their show because they don't know what's happening. So everything turned episodic. Everything turned quick, fast, in a hurry to match the decreasing attention spans of us and also some of the busier schedules, quite frankly. You also have to keep in mind the fact that in 2012, on the Spider-Man side of things, we were exhausted of the character a little bit. Considering how many times this little nigga from Queens had been adapted, just since 2000, you have Spider-Man Unlimited, Spider-Man 1, Spider-Man 2, Spider-Man 3, Spider-Man in 3D. Never do that shit again. Spectacular Spider-Man. And in 2012, along with a new animated show, a new reboot of a live-action Spider-Man in The Amazing Spider-Man 1 with Andrew Garfield. That means that in 12 years, there were at least 6 different interpretations of the wall crawler that all featured self-contained stories about him. This all coincides with the rise of the MCU, the release of the first biggest crossover in cinema history, with 4 characters all with their own solo films, 6 heroes in total coming together in 2012, in the Avengers, cementing that shared, connected, intertwining universes are here to stay. And especially with the franchise as storied and as long as Marvel, it would be a shame to continue to separate some of the greatest team-ups and combined experiences in media history. So while considering this, why not tell stories that feature the Spider in events that contain the entire Marvel universe? But before we get too deep into why I love the show and why I think the show is justified in its existence coming after a spectacular Spider-Man, I want to address some of the criticisms that people have had this show over the decade since it's come out. Number one, the show is not just not mature, it's completely unserious even in the dire moments of the series. I will say this: Ultimate Spider-Man struggles with its balance of maturity, especially early on. Despite being an episodic show, the series still has overlapping plot threads and a cast to develop throughout the show, especially since early on the show established itself as more of a Spidey and Friends type beat instead of the other solo series that we've gotten before. But as the series goes on, moments with Harry and Norman's relationship and later Norman's Goblin, correct amount of seriousness that I think is needed in parts like that. It masters this through the various team-ups and the building of the Sinister Six during season 2, all creating the right tone just in time for Miles' involvement in the story in the Spider-Verse storyline, which is said to be, and I agree with this, one of the best parts of the entire show. Criticism number 2, the fourth wall breaks and the angel and devil. I have nothing to say about this. They're annoying. It's hit or miss. It's for children, and even children, it's a mixed bag, I'm sure. These are two of the most annoying characters that I've ever seen in like superhero like animated media. It just is what it is. At the end of the day though, it's not really made for us, so I feel like elements of the show are not going to sit too well with us. Even in a show like Avatar, which I think is enjoyable for anyone of any age, there are annoying parts of that show, or at least hit or miss parts. There are adults who hate the Hidden Tunnel song and who hate the Cabbage Man because they're reoccurring gags throughout the series and kind of interrupt sometimes during the series' most dire moments. With this show, I'll definitely say it's more exaggerated and it happens more often, and it's even more overbearing, especially with the Angel and Devil. But by season 3, when the show does get more serious, those elements kind of fade out of the series for the most part. These elements are easy ways for Spider-Man to give the children watching the show information that they don't already pick up, especially the fourth wall breaks. And they capitalize on the episodic nature of the show by having constant insight to Peter's mind and recap on, well, current situations. It's kind of useless, I'm not gonna lie. Look, I'm not saying that they're all good, but they do all serve a purpose. Number 3, Spider-Man has little to no responsibilities and S.H.I.E.L.D. serves as too much of a safety net. All right, it's time for the big one. After years of watching Spider-Man films in the MCU, I've only come to one conclusion on how Peter Parker can operate within the greater, larger Marvel universe. Spider-Man fans know Spider-Man, so a story with cool but obscure team-ups, having a school ran by S.H.I.E.L.D., and casting his superhero friends as his classmates in the same story with Mary Jane and Harry Osborn, it's gonna raise a lot of eyebrows. And I won't even deny the fact that Spider-Man acts out of character a few times, nor will I say that Phil Coulson being his principal doesn't take stakes away. But I'm honestly at the point to where I think in any Spider-Man story, there's a trade-off. It goes beyond simply expanding the cast to the point to where you have to sacrifice individual character development like most stories have, but for Spider-Man, introducing the greater Marvel universe before a 3 to 4 seasons of solo Spidey, or maybe 2 to 3 movies of solo Spidey, will always feel unsatisfying. There is an independence that is felt when it comes to Peter Parker, and a burden that he carries with him in his early days of being Spider-Man that is required, I think, for any true Spider-Man fan to feel and accept the character as is, because there's a level of responsibility in that loneliness that he does find. And then when brought to the greater, larger universe and having these teams and these team-ups and such and these conglomerations, that is the best Peter Parker. But nevertheless, considering the state of how superhero media, cartoon media, and specifically Spider-Man media, I think it's excusable here. If you don't like it, to be honest, you never will. because there's no studio or franchise that will have 2 to 3 entries in a series of solo Spider-Man before him having a crossover with more heroes for a team up. At this point, it's kind of unrealistic as well. Ultimately, the Ultimate Spider-Man isn't for everyone. Quite literally, it wasn't trying to be. For its target audience, for the period of time it was released in, for the climate it was made for, it brings what the Spider-Man character is for a new crop of superhero fans. And I think the show does a pretty good job of that. It grows throughout its tenure. It's not like it stays stagnant. Neither Spider-Man nor the rest of the cast nor the storytelling of the series does. I'm able to look at this show through the same lenses that I look at something like a Marvel Ultimate Alliance. It serves as an introduction to the larger Spider-Verse and Marvel as a whole, and I love it. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments. I'm very curious as to your different opinions on Ultimate Spider-Man. It's a show that, upon this recent rewatch, I looked in high regard, although it has decreased a little bit since I rewatched it for the sake of this video, but I still do love the series, and I find a lot of value in it, especially for the modern climate of superhero movies, superhero media, and just Spider-Man in general. But that's all from me today. Check out my podcast. Leave a like if you enjoyed. Again, leave down in the comment section how you feel about Ultimate Spider-Man. I'll catch you guys later. Hope you have a good day.